Welcome everybody to Business Climate Leaders All Hands meeting. Really happy to have you all here. And to kick things off, I'm going to call on our newly anointed heads of our energy team, Pete Marsh and Michael Metzner, to introduce our speaker for the evening, Gil, and then we'll be followed by Norma Safransky, who will be sharing some of her CCL, BCL experiences with us. So with that, Michael and Pete.
Okay, well, hello everybody. And it's my pleasure to introduce Gil Jenkins. I should say that I co-head the electricity sector team with Pete Marsh, who you'll hear from in a few minutes, and also co-head the finance and insurance sector team with John Keller. But it's my pleasure today to introduce Gil. Gil is a director of corporate communications for Hannon Armstrong, which is headquartered in Annapolis, Maryland. And in this position, he's responsible for leading the company's communications activities, including media relations, brand marketing, social media, partnerships with membership organizations, and employee communications. He's also responsible for Hannon Armstrong's community and government affairs activities. It's my pleasure to say that Hannon Armstrong recently endorsed the Energy Innovation Act, and Gil participated in our June lobby day. In fact, I was in those meetings with him, and it was with both Maryland senators and one House rep from Maryland. Today, we're going to talk with Gil about building support among the business community for EICDA and how best to leverage that support with lawmakers. I should say for EICDA and the basic principles that we espouse. So with that, welcome, Gil. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us this evening East Coast time, that is. And I think we'll just jump right in. I'm looking for Gil on my screen, but I know he's on there somewhere. Gil, why don't we just start by asking you to just give a quick overview of Hannon Armstrong and what the company does.
Sure. And thank you for the kind introduction, Michael, and thrilled to be here with all the BCLers. Hannon Armstrong. We are proud to be the first U.S. public company solely dedicated to climate change investments. And more practically, our role as a capital provider, we're providing financing options to leading companies in energy efficiency, renewable energy, and another designation we call sustainable infrastructure markets. And really everything we do is based on a vision that, and a worldview that sort of every investment should improve our climate future. We actualize that vision through our purpose, which is to make climate positive investments with superior risk-adjusted returns. Company, as Michael mentioned, is based in Annapolis, Maryland. Although these days, sort of everywhere around the DC metro area, we invest about $1 billion a year across each of our core markets, which we define as behind the meter, grid connected, and sustainable infrastructure. And we have about $6 billion assets under management since we've gone public in 2013.
And I know, Pete, you're going to jump in, but just wanted to add, Gil, you have operations in almost all 50 states. Is that right?
That's right. We have investments in over 48 states, I think, at our last count. We've got earnings later this week, so hopefully we'll be able to add a Dakota or two to get to 49 or 50. But the company really largely invests in North America. We have a few minor international investments, but throughout most of our history, our focus has been the U.S.
Great.
Okay. Well, hey, welcome from me, Gil. This is Pete Marsh. I haven't had the pleasure to meet many of the other folks on the call, but I look forward to working with you. As Michael said, I'm co-lead with him on the electricity sector team. And Gil, it's a delight to have you on. I look back at the company's history on the website. You go back to the early 80s, I think, the two founders. And initially, we're funding a lot of telecom projects, quite a few government contract projects. And can you tell us a little bit about how the company evolved into first some green investments and then the pure play that you are today?
Right. So I've only been with the company 2 years, but I've committed myself to learning our history and helped put that those entries on our website. So as I mentioned, the company really was founded in, I think, 1981 with this vendor finance model. I think the first things we financed were Xerox machines for state and local governments. But that sort of vendor finance mindset found its way into telecom and other industries in the mid 80s. Jeff Eckel, our current CEO, started at the company, started the energy practice, was investing in some of the first, commercial utility scale solar projects that, mind you, are still operating today, which says a lot. He left the company when worked internationally for a developer. He came back in 2000. At this point, Hannon had done a lot more, really in our legacy business of energy efficiency performance contracts with the U.S. government. We were really a pioneer, starting in the 80s and through the 90s on this, pushing the government to adopt this energy performance contracting model. Our CEO testified in Congress. We really pioneered the first third-party financing for, I think it was the Postal Service, which at the time was about just putting more efficient lighting in. When Jeff came back to the company in 2000, he really started to pivot us more into the broader clean energy space, and that are leading to a management buyout, which eventually led to an IPO. And if you look at all the literature and the statement at the time, it was really about seeing climate change as a finance problem. It's many problems, but the finance is a huge component of it, and also seeing tremendous opportunity in financing that transition with the utility model, slowly but increasingly breaking down. So we have bulked up on our renewables investments to balance our historical energy efficiency focus in the last 7 years, continue to push the edge in the last 3 or 4 years into what I would call climate resiliency investments. So things like stormwater remediation and other niche investments that we'll continue to look at. And that's how we sort of evolved into a pure play climate solutions investor, and that 99% of our business, 95% of our business today is focused on technologies and projects that mitigate harmful carbon emissions, but increasingly looking at opportunities that involve us hardening our infrastructure, building more sustainable infrastructure to respond to the challenges we already face today. So
Great.
That's sort of the story in a nutshell.
Thanks, Gil. As we go around to different companies, we find there's often resistance to within those companies to actively lobbying or advocating for any sort of particular set of policies or legislation. It's kind of a mixed bag. So curious, how would you sort of describe in a nutshell Hannon Armstrong's policy towards advocacy and lobbying work with Congress, really at the federal level? And, how did you arrive at that?
Well, I'd like to tease our CEO, who I think I'm the only one that reminds him he has a master's in public administration as well as other advanced degrees. So I'm really, at least since I've been there, but I think historically, and I'll come back to this in a second, there's just been a real intellectual curiosity and rigor with respect to the policy implications of our business. And, it's really inextricable. the energy business and climate policy, and even more so as we have more of an increasing climate consciousness. So I inherited a pretty progressive, for lack of a better word, worldview in terms of engaging on policies. I would say historically, we engaged primarily to support and advocate for policies that advance renewables or efficiency or carbon, other forms of carbon mitigation through the trade associations, which is what a lot of companies of all sizes do. And that, that's policy tracking, sign-on letters, some direct engagement. But in addition to that, trade associations are, they push things that maybe have 80% consensus, and they're never going to advocate for perhaps the nuance that a specialized financier like Hannon Armstrong would, or, our worldview isn't limited. We're technology agnostic, so we're not just interested in the, specific wind asks on a federal level. So we've tried to move the clean energy business associations that we're in to have a more unified view and a unified voice where there's agreement between those technologies, but also engage, defensively, sometimes offensively on specific, with specific legislators, largely in our backyard, but on key committees. And really in the last 2 years, carbon pricing, and more specifically a carbon dividend, is our number one by a mile federal policy priority. It's the most impactful thing we can do to begin to bend the emissions curve. It's not the only thing, but it's the one thing we haven't tried as well. And there's incredible consensus, as I'm sure you all know, between the world's top economists, the same kind of a consensus for a carbon pricing model that exists with the scientists on that climate change is human caused. So that resonated with us, and it's why 2 years ago our CEO chose an unusual forum in his annual shareholder letter to talk about policy for the first 3 paragraphs. And we do that in part, sure, it would be good for our business, but we don't need it to succeed. We've proven that, we'll continue to prove that. But what kind of world would it be if we continue on the track we're on? So as we grow our business and our influence and have some expertise in financial markets, we want to continue to highlight cross-cutting policies that will make a difference. So it's logical that you reached out to us, and I had a little bit of insight into CCL as a concerned citizen and felt you had a good reputation, and here we are. I would say we've engaged actively in the last year and a half as more climate bills and reports have been coming out trying to shape that, and we'll continue to, as you look at various potential election scenarios where the likelihood of a major climate bill is feeling perhaps somewhat more possible. And we can't repeat the mistakes of 2009 if we get another shot at this. So we're in the fight, and we're thrilled to be with like-minded allies like BCL in getting meaningful climate legislation passed.
Sounds good. I think you handled kind of the next question, which was going to be about how you decided to support EICDA. So I think
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll opine a little bit more. I just say, I think from our perspective, this is about unleashing the power of markets, right? And it's an acknowledgement, I think, that the fossil fuel industry has been socializing these costs while privatizing the profits. So it's a deeply held view, and that's not a properly functioning market. So let's put a price on carbon. I think politically, to avoid what may be a dated reference now, but is a pretty powerful one, is to avoid a sort of yellow jacket movement in this country. It needs to be a revenue neutral dividend. And, economists have a program that says works. Citizens like getting cash rebates, and we all benefit from the reduced risk. So if And from there, you know, EICDA was pretty easy to find, and it has, importantly, the bipartisan element, and hopefully growing. It's revenue neutral, and we think it's the best route politically. And the modeling suggests, you know, we're talking really significant emission reduction, which is the most important point here.
Excellent.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gil. Wondered about, you've been with a variety of different companies from looking at your bio, and not every company is going to be as receptive as Hannon Armstrong to the policy in general and to endorsing it in particular. Any recommendations for us as we go out and engage businesses and seek to have them help us lobby the representatives?
Well, I think you got to continue to emphasize that, as I understand it, you know, BCL has the only actual bipartisan bill that's actually a bill out there. And I think it's important that you find a way to align with other groups that have business-focused groups on these issues, or business-focused campaigns on these initiatives that have already gotten a little bit of buy-in, sometimes at the C-suite. You know, it helps if you're getting to the CEO who has a demonstrated track record on these issues. And again, the sort of CEO focus groups, there's one called, and there's so many of them, but I mean, there's no denying that Citizens Climate Lobby is going to be important. They've got a bit of a critical mass with respect to their businesses and the high-powered folks that are involved with that. I think there's another group that includes Ford and some of the utilities where they're all meeting and have put together a philosophy statement, not an actual bill. But you got to continue to align with those folks. I think it's important that BCL also find ways to, you know, perhaps publish another study. Look, you know, I'm a press guy, so I'm going to tell you to keep getting yourself in the news and your plan in the news in different ways. I think that's important to show momentum. So aligning with other groups, putting some more studies out there, showing that momentum, emphasizing the bipartisan support, and find a way. I think it's maybe not going to work for every company, but I think where BCL and CCL is really different and exciting is, and I felt it when I participated in the June lobby days, was, you know, this is a grassroots, real citizen component of it that, you know, building an army there. And it's not some sleepy, or I don't think it's sleepy, but that's a real differentiator and a strength. And a lot of those, perhaps for some of the consumer focused brands, you know, that's a net benefit. And maybe there's some specific consumer led campaigns, given the active citizenry you have at the grassroots level, that becomes a carrot or a stick for business. But I think, you know, business, they're only going to go so far. They need pushing, but they also need to see that the groups they choose to spend time with are going to be impactful, respect their time, have a plan, have a way also to bridge what I think is an emerging concern that carbon pricing isn't the favored, isn't making its way into some of these sort of high-minded, well-intentioned climate plans and bills, or is not central. So if, given the credibility CCL has, can you bridge more to get the rest of the E&GOs on board? That'll help businesses feel like that, you know, the Sierra Club isn't just going to run roughshod over this.
Yeah, good points. And Randy, I know we don't have that much time. We want to save some time for general Q&A and some other folks, but maybe I could just ask one more of Gil, and then we could do that. Gil, and you sort of touched on it, but wondering if you'd share, if you've had a chance to look at this House Select Committee report in any detail. I mean, it's 500 pages plus.
597. I haven't.
597.
Yeah.
Okay. I should say 600 minus.
600. Yeah.
And if so, what are your, what's your sort of general impressions?
Well, I'd be lying if I said I read it all, or even that I read every one of the 15 one-pagers. But I read many summaries of it from our allies that have, and I've got more reading to do over August, because I do think it is an important and critical document that, particularly in a blue Washington scenario, will be one of the three key inputs as a starting point. And I'll say some nice things first for some nuanced critiques. I think it's a level of, it shows a real seriousness and a level of sophistication, at least in one party in Washington, to really get into the important nuances and show the relevant committees of jurisdiction. I've never seen anything like that before. I will say I'm a little disappointed that it was, and this is missed in the headlines, but it's a Democratic staff committee report. And now you're going to have the Republican staff on the committee put out their own report, which will probably only be 20 pages, and we'll know what's in that. And so I do wonder if they had engaged a little bit. They spent a year really gathering good stuff, but then sort of rushed it out. And I understand some of the reasons for that. You don't want it to get bogged down, but I would have liked to see maybe more of an attempt to get some more bipartisan input on that, because that matters long term. There's a lot we like. It is a kitchen sink bill. I think they acknowledge that, or it's not a bill, a kitchen sink report, because they don't really acknowledge how these policies would interact positively or negatively with each other. So there are some things we engage directly with the staff, particularly on the finance section. I will say that we were disappointed with some of the broad strokes with respect to some of the proposals and recommendations in the financing section. We don't feel that those, in principle, that they're not currently considering how much it could compete with a burgeoning private sector finance market. And, this is only going to work if we really have policies that encourage those public-private partnerships and stimulate a wall of capital that wants to be put to work and is just asking Washington for some clear policy signals. There's absolutely a role of government, a role of policy, but I worry a little bit that it's, kind of taking ideas from 5-10 years ago, and the market's changed and business has changed. And sometimes well-intentioned policymakers are not, getting a pulse of where the business is right now. But largely positive, hit a lot of sectors. There's more work to do, and it's going to have to be reconciled with presidential climate plan, probably only one, and I'm thinking the House Clean Future Act is probably another starting point. Those three documents will be where all this gets debated. But some good stuff in there, some things we would like to see differently. Lisa had carbon pricing, right? It said they should put a price on carbon, which
we had 2 pages on carbon pricing, and we're sort of in the process as a team of going through the report and showing how, while it's only 2 pages and only one building block, it's the keystone building block for many of the other.
Yeah, I encourage you. I hope that point is clear. It wasn't in the headlines in the press reports, but that's just who the agents are of certain ideas. So
sure.
Good news that it's in there and we can work from that.
That's great. Thank you. And
can I ask some questions, Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Gil. Really appreciate you being here. Appreciate the work you guys are doing in funding green tech, and appreciate your support and for our work. A couple questions. One, are you familiar with the regulatory pause that's part of the Energy Innovation Act?
I am, and
just kind of curious your thoughts on that and any concerns that raises for you, or
No, as I understand it, and I think Sheldon Whitehouse has talked about that, there probably are some redundant policies that wouldn't have as much efficacy. I think you've written some important caveats into that if prove otherwise, I don't have it in front of me, that you can ratchet those back. I'm not sure some of the other policies have those important caveats, so we're comfortable with how you've addressed it. But there has to be some give on both sides here to get a meaningful policy. So we're comfortable with that approach.
Good, thanks. A question, curious about the impact of price on carbon relative to the companies you work with. Would it increase their value immediately or over a longer period of time?
Well, there is some concern. I think it's overstated that this boosts natural gas in the near term and not renewables. So it sort of depends whose study you, and a lot depends on the starting price. I think that's a bit of an overstatement, because again, renewables will continue to do fine. I'm not sure there's going to be too much more incentive to build more natural gas infrastructure in the next 5 years because of the price on carbon policy you're talking about. But if it is true, but it means the next 15 to 30 years are, the renewables and efficiency and electrify everything movement, then again, I could live with that. So does that sort of answer your question? I've forgotten what it was now.
Just in terms,
yeah. I mean, there is support amongst the trade groups, but you know how Washington is. It's like the whole we have this balkanized energy policy, and everybody's got to have their specific handouts. And as long as certain industries have tax incentives, then renewables will want parity. And from our view, it's time to phase down the tax credits. We should probably eliminate the permanent tax credits for carbon emitting technologies while we're at it. But while we don't, then we should have some form of renewable tax credits. But we really need something that goes beyond the power sector. The power sector is headed in the right direction. It's ag and transport I'm concerned about. And I think the new demand that would be created from the growth in clean transport, that would be good for our renewables clients. They recognize that. I think you'll hear more about that from our clients, and we're certainly pushing them to get on this train.
Great, thank you. Question in terms of besides consumer, I think you mentioned consumer industries being an area that we should focus on. Are there other industries that kind of jump out, ways that would be supportive and we should be focusing around carbon pricing, getting support for carbon pricing?
Well, I think it's hard to move the rest of the financial sector. I mean, we're just getting them to acknowledge they need to stop investing in fossil fuels. But they're perhaps sort of, I would start almost look for European headquartered brands in any sector and start from there. I don't know if there's one, because consumer, there's like what do the tech companies versus consumer packaged goods. I don't know that I have a good answer on like one segment that's sort of a prime, should be a prime advocate for us. I think the more important thing is like, what are these companies who have strong sustainability goals and an active and engaged workforce and have influence? I mean, to sort of focus on that, and carbon pricing should align with the kind of ambition this country needs that they're trying to demonstrate with their own businesses. And many of them, you know, certainly the ones that already have internal carbon pricing, like I think Microsoft and some other consumer companies, they're sort of prime for this.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. In terms of the select committee report, you mentioned that there's some old concepts that might not meet current market needs. Can you elaborate on that? Anything that sticks out in that area?
Sure. Well, there's an idea in there, a proposal, and they've changed the name a few times. It proposes something called a National Climate Bank, which is an extension of a regional model for green banks. It would set up more local green banks and also have a national climate fund. They've changed the name, I think, to a National Clean Energy Accelerator, in part because our concerns, because if you're going to call something a bank, it should have certain requirements that private sector financiers have. So fundamentally, I think the idea germinated around 15 years ago, in part because there wasn't enough financing going to wind and solar in particular. And that has changed. I think we've had around 70 billion last year in clean energy in the US alone. There's a course saying we can do $1 trillion by 2030. It's not a capital program. And I think where this idea has gotten some legs is it proposes that it won't compete with private capital, but the devil's in the details. And some of the regional banks, if they were to be 10 times the size, if you're funding something to the tune of $35 billion, we just think that $35 billion could be spent on other important policies that industry actually wants, that will create actual demand and not just sort of have feel-good projects. So we're concerned with that. We made our critiques known sort of behind the scenes. We may become more public with those concerns. The viability of it politically is questionable, but I have a lot of problems with it too, because it talks about some important things like environmental justice and providing financing in these disadvantaged communities, which is right, and we need to spread. There are projects that the private sector won't finance today, but only 20% of the funds are going to those projects. So you can't say things like we're going to prioritize environmental justice, but then structure something that is going to compete on, commercial solar that's being financed today, that's economic, energy efficiency project. And you're just creating a sort of perverse structure that questions, again, should government be doing this, or should government be doing other things that are going to send those private those signals and create more demand? Or if government is going to do in that business, make it more of the focus on disadvantaged communities. So it's an interesting idea, because on the surface it seems like a good idea, but I think there's just this intellectual blockage that, we got to have a financing chapter. So who's got a financing idea? That's not the issue. And when you have a kitchen sink report, unfortunately, well-funded special interest groups get their pet projects in, and industry isn't asking for it. So hopefully, however self-interested we are, we can also be a voice of reason on this, because we're in this marketplace, and we want to do the right thing, and everyone does. So I might be coming to this group saying, hey, can you sign a letter, saying this money could be spent elsewhere? And I would really hope it's not in any of the priorities of this group. I know you're focused on more on than just the carbon dividend, but it's a solution in search of a problem. So.
Great. If I can ask one last question of you, and appreciate your time here. If a carbon fee gets passed, that's steadily growing at least our plan, $10 a year. Will that signal investors to really quickly change their investment out of fossil fuels?
Oh, absolutely. Because you're going to have just tremendous pricing certainty. I mean, these are 20, 30, 40-year investable assets, and so investors are looking at it at that kind of scale. So there's already a lot of capital in the clean energy space, but you'd see there's no shortage of it. And there's an interest in this, and that's just that kind of tipping point. I'm not sure which study I can point to, but I think it's Columbia, or maybe it's the folks at CCL, which I know is a different plan. They talked about $1.5 trillion by 2030.
Yeah, I think that was the CLC, the Climate Leadership Council's plan. But yeah, I guess so. The question is, as we know the study's there and we believe it, but you as a business person believe it and really.
Oh, there's no question. And,
investments will shift.
I can't share like what our models would say, but again, and it's not just going to be going into power sector decarbonization. That's the importance of it. You're going to see innovation and investment in ag and transport, that we really need, because the trend lines are good in the power sector. They're not happening fast enough, and it's going to have to make up for lack of progress elsewhere. But that's the beauty of this policy.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Gil. Can't thank you enough for joining us again and all your support of what we're doing. And yeah, if you have a letter for us to sign to support and move on, well, let's talk.
Great.
So welcome having you stay. We're going to be here to the top of the hour. You're more than welcome to join us. And as well, if you want to go and grab some food or family, whatever it may be, you're more than welcome to say goodbye as well. So big thank you. If everybody can clap for Gil, really appreciate it. So
Thank you,
Thank
Gil.
you very much. I have a 2-year-old, so I'm gonna take your invite to go spend some time with him.
well, we're trying to educate them earlier and earlier. So bring him or her along, and we'll indoctrinate them. So thanks again.
Hey, thank you for all you're doing. I just, it's an inspiring, as a citizen and as a business person, I just thank you for all you're doing. And I'm just, again, every time I talk to you guys, or it's we're going to get there. So Thank you again.
Yep, we're in it
have
together. So
We'll be in touch.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So with that, if I can
Thanks so much.
introduce Norma Safransky, who is a CCLer of about 3 years standing. She's a psychiatrist in our Chapel Hill chapter and has been doing some really good things on the BCL side. So I wanted to turn it over to her to share her experience. Still muted. Let's get you off mute here. Can you unmute yourself, Norma?
There we go. Okay, thank you. Well, thanks for having me. I guess I'm listed as being on CCL for about 3.5 years, but I had a little break in between. And since I've been back, I've been on a new team in Chapel Hill. Well, I'm in Chapel Hill, but I was on a Durham team for a representative called GK Butterfield. And I joined Grasstops because I thought if we were going to influence Mr. Butterfield, Representative Butterfield, that what seemed to me to be a good strategy would be to follow the money. Like, who is supporting his campaign? So I went on this website called Open Secrets. Maybe some of you are familiar with that. And got a list of all of his donors. And then I just started researching who the donors were. And what sort of policies they had around climate change. And then I just started researching who their sustainability officers were and finding ways of contacting them. And somebody wisely connected me with Harold Hedelman, who has then been with me with every meeting that I've managed to arrange. So I'll just name a couple of the companies that I've been in contact with. I guess I will say that as I was doing the research, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see how many companies have, from my uneducated eye, some fairly robust sustainability policies. So that gave me some encouragement. And as I've connected to these companies, I've also realized that their sustainability officers tend to be younger people. I'm allowed to say that now because I have my Medicare card. And so lots of people seem younger to me. But I think these younger folks get into these sustainability offices because of their interest in saving the planet and because they have children. So connecting with them by email and then by phone, and then setting up a meeting with them with Harold, because my level of understanding and experience in lobbying and all the ins and outs of the bill is kind of, I'm in a sort of beginner's mind about all of that. So I started out, my first project was to try to do some local company that I might have some personal way of connecting with. And I had purchased a Toyota Prius from a local car dealer. And so I called them and told them that I was a volunteer with CCL and could I talk to somebody about what the work I'm doing and whether or not they'd be willing to support the work of CCL. And I was very surprised that they, within a couple of phone calls, said that they would be willing to sign the endorsement for the bill. So that just gave me a lot of courage. And then I just started going down the list of donors to GK Butterfield. And they've included people like Cox Automotive and JM Family Enterprises, Biogen, Aflac, Bayer, Amgen, AstraZeneca, BlackRock. And then I just did my research on the internet and found who I could talk to in their sustainability offices and connected with them and try to set up a meeting. So that's what I've been up to. Any questions?
Yeah, let us know if anybody has questions for Norma. So I find it interesting. So you're a psychologist or psychiatrist, excuse me. So not with a business background, right?
Not at all, but with a health background. And also I'm a very avid gardener. And my North Carolina zone moved from 6 to 7 in the last couple of decades. So I'm seeing climate change firsthand.
So you have good stories that you can tell of personal experience. And how have you found kind of engaging with executives?
They've actually been very, very friendly and warm. They tend to drop the ball. So calling them back every couple of weeks and reminding them that I'm there, sending them an email and non-judgmentally, you know, being aware that they're really busy and so forth. But whenever I've actually contacted them, even if I'm starting the phone call with a little trepidation that they're going to feel like I'm bothering them, it's never happened. So it's been kind of encouraging.
Somebody asked, what do you say when you actually talk to them, when you called, and how did you get their attention?
Well, fortunately, I have Harold with me. No, when I first contacted them, I just say, I've seen their sustainability policies on the internet that I think that their goals for climate change are in line with CCL's goals. And so can we work together? Can I tell you more about what CCL is doing? Can I set up a meeting with somebody who knows more than I do about all of this? And we just go from there.
Great. And somebody asked in terms of some of the companies you mentioned, they're outside of Representative Butterfield's district. So do you use the Grasstops engagement tracker to kind of check on companies and who's working with different companies?
Yeah, so the companies that I mentioned are on his donor list.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they're outside of his district, they're still spending money to get him elected.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, at some point it dawned on me they're probably spending money with a lot of different representatives. So I thought, well, whatever, I'll just go for it anyway. So the Grasstops engagement calendar, when I first made the list, I went through all of them and checked to see if there was any delegate already assigned to that company. And I contacted the delegate to see if they made any progress. And in all of the cases, except maybe one or two, they had just given up. So I just picked that up again. I didn't put myself down as a delegate because I felt kind of overwhelmed by the form that I needed to fill out to do that. So that's something that I have on my radar to do. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, I sat down to do that, but the Grasstops engagement calendar was shut down for a little while. And I think it's back up now, so
Great.
It's on my radar.
Yeah, I think it is. If somebody, maybe Steffi, could pop the URL, the link to the Grasstops engagement tracker in the chat.
Yeah,
That'd be
I've
great.
got it.
It looks like there's a couple questions here. Bernard Cascade, if I can unmute you maybe, and do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Norma. That's some wonderful work you're doing. So I'm curious, when you listed off those supporters, it sounded like several of them were pharmaceutical.
Hold on, they're not supporters yet. I'm just building relationships with most of them.
Okay. Well, no, funders. It sounded like you were reading off funders. And several that you mentioned appeared to be pharmaceutical companies. And when you were going down that list, oh my gosh, my representative has a lot of pharmaceutical companies supporting him as well. Something tells me pharmaceutical companies supporting everybody, right? So I was kind of curious, how has your luck been with pharmaceutical companies in that specific industry?
Okay, so let's see. The ones that I have: AstraZeneca, Biogen. I have some other ones. Those are the two main ones right now that I'm working on, but I have some more on my list to connect with. AstraZeneca, we had a couple of meetings with them. Then they got overwhelmed with the pandemic. And so she asked me to put a pause on our work and to connect with her back in September. But they are interested in what we're doing. Biogen, I'm still sort of going back and forth with emails and voicemails and haven't really got very far with them.
Great. And just to throw out there, that pharmaceuticals is definitely, a key industry, a major influencer to our legislative members, and an area that we would love to get more involved in. So we've always been looking for somebody interested in kind of heading up that. We don't have a sector lead within BCL for the pharmaceuticals. So if anybody out there might have interest, let us know. One more question from Steve Selby, if you want to unmute, and then just one last question for Norma, and then I'll turn it over to Rebecca to give us an update on BCL.
Hi, Norma. Just up the road from you in Lynchburg, Virginia. So at the start of this year, I kind of had a plan like yours, where we were going to we were starting to try and contact local businesses that would influence our congressman. And we had like a really great meeting in February, and we had a great plan. And then with everything shut down, I mean, I've just been really disrupted by it, and I really don't know how to proceed. So how are you working with the situation now?
Yeah, I can really relate to that, because I was also connecting with the local hospitals to see if we could get some climate change education and CCL education into the hospitals. And then that just completely collapsed. So I took a little bit of a pause right when everything shut down. I just stopped calling and emailing people. But since then, I've been reconnecting with people, kind of gingerly, just acknowledging that they must be really busy and occupied with all the challenges associated with the pandemic. And then I usually close the email or the voicemail with something along the lines, if the one thing that I've learned from this pandemic, it's that it's way better to get ahead of the crisis than to be trying to play cleanup. So I try to do that in a really short sentence. And people are starting, it seems like the companies that I've been contacting seem like they're starting to have a little bit more space to re-engage.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Norma. Really appreciate you being here and appreciate the great work and inspiration that of the work that you're doing. So thank you for that. So if I can put a pause on questions for now, and we're going to pass it over to my colleague at BCL, Rebecca Keller, to share with you a brief update on what BCL has been doing.
Yes, we have been busy. We have new endorsements. Athenium Analytics, a company that provides solutions for the insurance industry, has most recently endorsed EICDA and say that they will, in fact, lobby with us. And then there was Hannon Armstrong, who's pretty recent, and you know what they do. DSM is the third, large mid company. They are a Dutch multinational corporation with operations here. In addition, there are 45 wineries and 198 breweries that have been added to those declarations. Another new thing for us is interns. BCL has arranged to have, the number of people at BCL steering worked hard to find some interns, and it has been a very successful effort. We have been working this summer with some very bright, passionate, and energetic students in furtherance of BCL goals. We are looking to continue this effort into the fall. So if any of you know of interested students, please have them contact us via the BCL homepage. Then our marketing communications team is another area of activity. They have been doing a number of things. One is to work with some of BCL's sector teams on the team's industry communications plan, which from my perspective is a really excellent idea, because some of us hadn't even thought to have an industry communications plan. So that is helpful. Also, they have been working on improving the BCL website, which was improved a couple of years ago, and I thought it was really good. And now it's really, really good, and take a look at it. Also, they've been working on publishing a number of blogs. Please, if you have any ideas to contribute, let us know. And finally, we have some upcoming events. Climate Collaborative 2 days from now, Thursday, has advocacy training for businesses. And I know we're generally not businesses, but if you're working with businesses and want to help them know how to advocate, this would be a good meeting to attend. It's open to everyone. Just go to Climate Collaborative's website under events and you can see exactly how to register for Thursday. And then the very next day, there is the Silicon Valley Leadership Group Annual Summit. I don't have the link to that either, but and I didn't look it up, but I don't know, can somebody put that in the chat box? It's Friday. That's an annual meeting and it's going to be broader than I believe just climate, but I understand they do an excellent job on environmental issues. And finally, there is a wine industry climate declaration webinar, which is, I believe, if you're interested in learning how to participate in this declaration effort or expand your activity, that attending the seminar would help. I've noticed it's not on our calendar yet, but it's sometime on September 10th, and I'm sure we'll be sending information around for that. That's it.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, both those, the Climate Collaborative and the Silicon Valley Leadership Group events, you'll find them on the Action Team page in our forums on CCL Community and the BCL Action Team. Thanks, Rebecca, for that update. Any questions now? We have a couple minutes left, so I know we had some questions from before for Norma and Gil, some tough questions that the energy team might want to take a look at and respond to as well if they can't do it here. If you want to raise your hand or just unmute and ask a question, go for it.
Is the winery declaration webinar for anyone who's interested, any winery owner, like if we would reach out to them to join? Is that the one that Bill and you guys are putting together?
Yep. It's designed to bring wineries together to talk about the EIA. We're going to have a couple wineries that have endorsed speaking, as well as Jonathan Marshall talking about the economics of the EIA and how it affects the wine industry. So it's just, I threw it out there just to say that we're planning on it, working on it. More details will follow, but yeah, both
you
BCL.
guys are calling all the winery owners across North Carolina or across the nation for that?
That's secondary. We have a list of about 12,000 wineries of contacts at 12,000 wineries across the country that we're emailing right now to endorse the declaration, but also we'll be notifying them about the webinar, and we can also have you, hopefully you guys will touch base with the local people that you're working with too to join.
Okay, great. Thank you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Randy, this is Claudia in Minnesota.
Yeah, go ahead.
If in our state, law firms are some of the biggest supporters, funders of candidates. Are law firms in the BCL constellation, or have you done any work with law firms?
We haven't. We were just looking at kind of having we have a declaration for healthcare professionals. We're looking at launching one for real estate professionals, realtors. And lawyers would be an interesting one as well if somebody wanted to take that on. The idea. Go ahead, Rebecca.
I have not tried calling any attorney's offices, and I don't know anyone who has. However, I did notice, I think it's maybe about a year old, that the American Bar Association came out and said, hey, this is an important issue. We need to be on it. And we ask any of our attorneys or law offices if they are asked to represent someone in anything having to do with climate change, please, if you could do that pro bono. They don't say anything about supporting a price on carbon. So maybe they do. Anyway, so it seems to me an area that would be ripe for somebody to take a look.
Yeah, it's the top of the hour now, so want to thank everybody for joining us. Really appreciate you being here. Appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. So with that, I will close it, but I will still be here. And anybody who wants to hang around and has questions that didn't get answered, please do. And those of you that need to go, have a great night and a really nice rest of your week.
Thank you, Randy.
Yeah, very much. Any questions if you have one? Claudia, on the legal side, we haven't pursued them, at least as BCL. I don't know if any chapters have, but happy to talk to you about that if it's something you'd be interested in or interested, particularly in leading, as with all things CCL. We love people to have great ideas, but also that they want to see how we can implement them.
Well, this is Claudia again. I'm not sure I'm ready to take it on, but I'm going to be giving a talk to another one of our local chapters on Grass Tops Outreach, and I might sound them out on it and see if anybody there is interested or what thoughts they have. So we'll see, maybe.
All right, thank you.
Randy, this is Tom Ream down in Texas. I heard you mention energy team. Were you referring to a CCL action team, or is this something within BCL?
It's a BCL action team, and that Michael here and Pete Marsh are heading up, and would love, based on your question, would love your input in.
Yeah, great. Well, I threw up my email address in the chat, so I'd like to engage with you gentlemen.
Okay, great.
Michael, you got that?
Yeah, we'll follow up. Yep, we'll do that. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, great.
Yeah, to Michael and Pete's credit, they've really energized, forgive me, the energy team, and I think they have about 40 or 50 people at some of their meetings, and contacting numerous energy providers, and also just to note, just launched the carbon-free energy climate declaration, so you can find that on BCL site. And if you have companies in your area, solar, nuclear, whatever it may be, non-fossil fuel companies, installers, et cetera, to support, that's a way to engage and support the work that we're doing.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'll send you some links, as well as when our next team meeting is.
Okay, great. Look forward to it.
I missed the beginning of the meeting. Is there a way to find the recording? I noticed that it's being recorded through Zoom.
It is. I will post it. Have you joined BCL on Community?
I'm not sure I have. I can make sure to do that though.
So if you're part of Community, just search or look for Business Climate Leaders under the action teams. And if you join the group, then I will post it in the forums there. I also send it out to the Grass Tops outreach group as well. So there'll be different places, and email me if you can't.
Perfect. I will be checking the forums. Thank you.
Randy, this is Alex. I have a quick question. I know a young person who I might want to point to you folks. To whom should I send her if she's interested in engaging with you, just as a volunteer?
For a volunteer, you can send her to me, which would be fine. The easiest would be info@businessclimate-leaders.org, or you can email me or find me on I'll put here. I'm just going to put my email in the chat here. How about that?
That'd be great. Thank you. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions that didn't get answered? All right.
Thank you. This was excellent.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.